Hi, this video is on depreciation, part of the finance unit in general maths. We're learning to know what depreciation means, know what two methods of it are, straight line and reducing balance, know what the formulas are for these two methods, know how to calculate the future value of an asset using those two methods, know how to graph them and then compare when one method will be better than another, and to understand why it is sometimes good for something we own to be worth less money. Okay. Depreciation. As an asset grows older, it decreases in value or depreciates, so that means it goes down in value over time. The method that we're going to look at here is straight line depreciation. This is where the value of an asset, so something you own like a car or a house or a computer, goes down by a fixed amount, so it's the same amount every year. Now the amount that it goes down by is D here, and you can see that this is in the form of a straight line equation. Okay, here's an example. A $20,000 vehicle depreciates by $3,000 every year. Find its value after 6 years and represent the declining book value of the vehicle in a depreciation table. So it goes down by a fixed amount every year, which means it's a straight line reducing balance. This formula is what we're going to use. V equals negative D n plus C. D is how much it decreases by, so this is going to be 3,000. C is what it started at, which is 20,000. And N is the number of years, which is 6. V, we don't know yet. If we put these values into our formula here, we can calculate that it will be worth $2,000 after 6 years. Now we can put this information in a table like this. If it starts at $20,000, goes down by $3,000, it finishes at $17,000. So it would start the next year at $17,000, depreciate another $3,000, it's worth $14,000. This column is a running total of how much it's gone down by in total. So 3,000, then 6,000, 9,000, 12,000 and so on. So you can see down here, the straight line depreciation, it goes down by the same amount every time. The amount it goes down by in total is this running tally here, and this is what it's worth at the end. And as you can see, 6 years, $2,000. Now this question's interesting. It asks us after how many years, so we're going to be trying to find n, and the other information is in the question. Pause the video and see if you can work it out. Okay, well, it tells us that it's depreciation of $200 a year, so our difference D is going to be 200. It's a $1,200 asset, so that's our starting value here, and it's worth 500, so we know what V is. We can substitute everything in now and work it out. So V is 500, which is equal to minus 200 times n, which we don't know, plus 1,200. Now if we rearrange that equation, we're going to get 200n equals 1,200 minus 500 will be 700. So n is equal to 700 divided by 200. So n is 3.5 years. You can use the solver on your calculator to work this out, but if you're asked to do it algebraically, you would need to show some progress. Okay, now this example is about the different method, based on a reducing balance. This time it depreciates by a fixed percentage rather than a fixed amount. So for example, a piece of machinery costing $2,000 depreciates by 20% of its book value every year. Remember, its book value is how much it's worth at the start of the year. Represents its value over 6 years by using a depreciation table. So we start at $2,000. Now 20% of 2,000 is 400, so that's how much it goes down by. Accumulated depreciation is 400, and at the end of the year it's worth 1,600 because we've reduced it by $400. Now what happens next year is we put our 1,600 in, but when we work out 20%, it's going to be different. 20% of 1,600 is 320. So you can see that the amount that it's depreciated by has changed. The accumulated is still just a running total, so it's adding up the total amount that it's depreciated. But what we do here is we take off the 320 from the 1,600, and that gives us this value it's worth at the end of the year. And then this goes into this one. So it's 1,280 at the start of the year. 20% of that is 256, and so on. Okay. So 20% in each case is different every time, because 20% of 2000 is different to 20% of 1600. And the reducing balance depreciation gets less every year, so it goes down by less every time. And we'll see what that looks like when we graph it shortly. Now, if this seems a little familiar, it's because it's very similar to compound interest, but this time it's reducing instead of increasing. We can represent it with the compound interest formula, just that we're going down by a fixed percentage instead of going up by a fixed percentage. So A in this case is how much it's worth after n years, P is how much it starts off being worth, and I is how much it gets reduced by. Confirm the value of a $2,000 machine after 6 years depreciation at 20% based on the reducing balance. Pause the video, see if you can fill in the values and work out what A is. Well, we should have P is 2,000, that's what it starts out being worth. I is 0.2 because it's going down by 20%, and N is 6 because it's 6 years. If we put that into our formula, we end up with 2,000 times 1 plus 0.2 to the 6, which is $524.29. If we just go back, you can see that's what that value was there. Okay, using your calculator. Now, if you bring up your compound interest screen, you can use the same idea that we've used to solve problems before, but this time it's going down in value, so we have a negative interest rate going down by 25%. So, put your calculator into the compound interest screen. N is going to be 6 years. The percent is minus 25 because it's going down by 25%. Our PV, negative 1200. No payments. And what we want to do is work out what the final value is. Now it should be 1, 1 and begin at the bottom. Remember, always put it in begin unless we're doing annuities and arrears. So it should look like that, and when you click FV, you should get $213.57. Something a little bit odd about depreciation and taxation. Ordinarily, you might think that you always want things to depreciate slowly. If you have a car, you would want it to hold its value. You don't want it to be suddenly worth nothing. But in the case of taxation, it's a little bit different. Depreciation can be considered a business expense. What this means is that as your assets become worth less, then your profit could be considered smaller, which means that your tax burden could be considered less. So you would have to pay less tax. And the Australian Tax Office will give you a choice as to how you depreciate different assets. It's up to you to choose which method is best for you. So you will want to choose a method that reduces the amount of tax you pay. You'll have heard a lot about this really in the news recently. This is tax avoidance as opposed to tax evasion, which is illegal. Summary: for tax purposes, it's better to have things depreciate more so that they appear to be worth less and you pay less tax. Okay, now this is an interesting one. Computer equipment worth $3,000 depreciates by 15% of the purchase price each year. Now, this looks like reducing balance because it says percent, but it's not, because it's not the book value. If it was 15% of the book value, it would reduce by 15% of whatever it was worth at the start of each year. But if it's 15% of the purchase price, well, that's $450, and it's saying it's reducing by $450 every year because it's the purchase price. So it's a fixed amount it goes down by each year. So choose the formula, use your formula sheet, write it down, write the bits down here, fill in everything you can and see if you can work it out. So you should get V equals minus dn plus C, and then you can substitute in the values. So we can work out its value using this information. V is minus 450 times 6 plus 3,000, which equals $300. Now, alternatively, you could depreciate it by 25% on a reducing balance. So this means 25% of its value every year. New formula, new set of values here. See if you can work it out. Okay, we don't know A. It starts at 3,000, reduces by 25% each time, and N is 6 years. So A is 3,000 times 1 minus 0.25 to the 6. Use your calculator. And we get $533.94. So you can see, using the reducing balance, it was worth more at this stage than it was using the straight line. which one you would choose would depend on what you want, an asset that's worth more money or an asset that's worth less money. Okay, now we're going to prepare graphs of both of those now, and I'm going to get you to use your calculator to draw them first, and then we'll put it onto this diagram here. So first, get your calculator, go into graph and table, clear anything out that you've already got in there, and we're going to put the two equations in here. So I'll write them up here first for us. Okay, they were v equals minus 450 n plus 3,000. That was the straight line reducing balance, so it starts at $3,000, goes down by 450 a year. And then there was the reducing balance version, where it starts at 3,000 and goes down by 25% every year. Okay, so first put these both in, minus 450 x plus 3,000 and 3,000 times 1 minus 0.25 to the power of x, like that. Select them both and we'll graph them. Now, actually quite nice that we can see these straight away. What we really want to do is change our view window to fit the values that we've got. So click on your view window. Our x is going to start at 0 and we're going down to 7 years. So go from 0 to 7. For y, we're starting at $3,000. You might want to go just a little bit above, so 3,200. We'll go down to 0. Oops, it's the wrong way around. There we go, 3,200. Click OK, and there we have it. Okay. Now I've just done a very quick sketch of what that looks like, but you need to make sure that the points match up. So there should be about 450. So, and another 450 there, and so on. And you label a couple of points here. Now, what we're really interested in is this one, which we're going to find out next. You know, when is it that they're both worth the same amount using the two methods, and then you can decide which one you would choose depending on what situation you were in. But you'll notice it's always interesting. These are always going to start at the same point, so they start being worth $3,000, and then at some point the reducing balance starts off depreciating more quickly, but in this case, it takes over here. The straight line just continues to go down by that same amount every time. And this one, if you remember, the reducing balance always started to reduce by a smaller amount. So at some point it's just going to tail off. It's never going to get down to 0, whereas this one will just go straight down. But this is an interesting point. When are they worth the same, and how could we work it out? Okay, now to find the intersection of the 2 points, what we need to do algebraically is to set those two equations equal to each other and solve. So what we've got is the straight line equation equal to the reducing balance equation. If we solve that equation, which you need to use your calculator for to solve it, and work out what n is, or x using your calculator, that'll tell us exactly where it crosses. So you can put it in your calculator in the solve mode. Hit. Oh, more solutions may exist. Okay, and we've got 0 and 5.15. Now, there's two solutions, but we should expect that. Have a look back at the graph and see they were the same at 0 years. They were the same because they were 3,000, and then the same again down here, 5.15 years. So just after 5, yeah, down here, 5.15 years, they're the same. Another way to find this is using the Cas graphing mode. Okay, so bring your calculator, go back into the graph, click in the graph and go to Analysis G-Solve, and we want the intersection, the point of intersection. It'll tell us 2, 0, 3,000, and if you hit right, 5.15, and it actually tells us that the amount it's worth there is 681.34. Okay, so to interpret that in words, it means that at 5.15 years, both methods have the equipment worth $631. Now, which of the two methods would be best to use for tax purposes if the owner's intention was to replace the equipment after 3 years? So we need to have a look at it, what happens at 3. Look here, at 3 years, it's worth this much here using straight line and this much here using reducing balance. Reducing balance values it at less, which is good for tax purposes. So the owner should use the reducing balance method at 3 years, as he wants his asset to be worth less for tax purposes. If he was reselling it, he would want the other way around and want straight line. Quick recap. So there are two methods that we use: straight line if it goes down by a fixed amount every year, and reducing balance if it loses a percentage of its book value every year. Okay, that's it.